I was thinking about it this morning, I'm like, and I've been feeling the pressure of this. All we have to do is reset the world this morning on a Sunday morning. But I love that everyone has turned up. I love the sort of person who will turn up for us to try and do that this morning on a Sunday morning. But then I sort of took the pressure off. I'm like, so much has already changed this year. The world is completely reset already. If you told me a year ago that it would be a coalition, Liberal National Conservative government who ran up the biggest debts and deficits in our nation's history, who unveiled the biggest multi-billion dollar welfare program that the nation has ever seen, who boosted JobSeeker, who, introduced incentives for hiring people, and even that it would be Scott Morrison, I would think that is complete fantasy. That has come to pass. And it sort of underscores for me how quickly we can change things if we want to, if we see the immediate need. And in particular, the way that this has fed through our politics. We are now unleashed to do things that we would never thought of before or dreamt possible, because we have now bipartisan agreement that if you've got to do stuff for society, it doesn't really matter how much it costs. If you see the immediate need, you can do it. And that whole thing about balancing the budget and debts and deficit turns out to be a bit of a furphy. We don't want to keep doing it forever if there's no crisis and spend money that doesn't need to be spent. That's not good. But if there's an immediate need, yes, the government can borrow money. If we borrow the money and spend it on things that increase the productive capacity of our economy, which avoid decades-long scarring from unemployment and get people back to work quickly. Yeah, we can definitely do all that stuff.
We understand the cultural determinants of health, of having a stable and well considered and designed environment is actually conducive to health outcomes. So what we've seen in COVID is that rush to get out of the house and engage with the lungs of our cities and towns, being our gardens and our parklands and so on. They are critical, and so we can try and use that for built form only, but we're going to lose a lot because they are the social connectors. They are the glues which actually bind community. And so we can see how, if we start to think about it in those terms, we can start to scale that up, and you have that ripple effect, and thinking it, not only in our major metropolises, but in our regional centres, in our remote areas. So thinking of it in a much more holistic way. I think the tendency has been to think in a very narrow band, and I think understanding social cohesion is really important.
Yeah.
Oh, and I just wanted to add to that, when you were kind of thinking about understanding the multiple layers of history that are located in place. Why that's so critical is to get people to value the green space that's closest to them, or the green space that they use, the natural environment, is not just about here are pretty trees, or I can cycle through. We value places because they're wrapped in stories, and that we understand those stories, and that we link those stories that we have to the history there. And so in order to get people to deepen their value about the environment, it also has to, we have to write those stories into them and see them as connected. This is why understanding First Nation stories around us isn't just a box-ticking exercise. It's a critically important part of what it is to value that space that you have. And I've seen time and time again in the social research I do, realising that if somebody loves a place because it was a place that they went fishing with their father and their grandfather, and they learnt certain things, and they've got stories, they understand why plants grow, or they can understand that an invasive species, even if it might look nice, does this to something else. And I've seen constantly that people that have those stories and understand that history will fight to protect that space, will work together as a community to protect that space, which is why the kind of work you're doing, or anybody that does that, to kind of embed narratives and stories in place, is so, it's vital.